Hello everyone. Explorers are welcomed by the people whenever they bring back trophies, new lands, stories that humanity has never heard before, and great honours. But perhaps you are mistaken. Explorers often have to face hidden dangers, and sometimes even threats to their very lives. In ancient times, explorers were sent on expeditions by kings and often never returned. Even today, in order to achieve a great feat, they must be ready to face danger. Today, let's learn about explorers, the things they must endure, and put ourselves in their shoes. Before drifting off to sleep, perhaps take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It will be fascinating to see everyone joining us from all over the world. Now dim the lights, enjoy the quiet, listen to the story, along with the crackling of the firewood, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You jolt awake as the ship tilts slightly, a long creak echoing from the damp wooden hull, as if the sea were whispering something you can't quite understand. Outside, the darkness is thick, broken only by the dim, flickering glow of an oil lamp reflecting off the deck planks, casting a weak golden hue that trembles with each sway of the waves. No one woke you, yet it seems the unusual rhythm of the ship's movement itself has told you. It's time to leave your cabin, step out to where wind and water meet, and see what is happening. And then, as your hand touches the railing, the wind strikes your face. Salty, cold, and carrying the scent of a place that maps mark only with a few blurred strokes. You realise you are heading into a land few have ever set foot upon, and almost no one has returned from with their full story. That's what it means to be an explorer. It's not always drums, fluttering flags, or farewells. Sometimes the decisive moment is just the creak of wood, a strange glimmer on the horizon, or a sudden shift in the wind. People often imagine exploration as a thrilling adventure, but where you stand, it's simply the act of taking one more step into the unknown. Ever since humans first drew the earliest lines on a map, they have dreamed of lands beyond their reach. The first explorers had no precise compass, no detailed maps, and sometimes no idea which direction they were even heading. They relied only on the position of the sun, the changing colour of the sea, or the flight of migrating birds. Sometimes they set sail merely because of a rumour that in that direction lies a golden island, or sail far enough that way and you'll reach the edge of the world. Many vanished on such journeys, leaving behind stories half true, half myth for future generations. You walk slowly along the ship's deck, your hand brushing against the cold grain of the wood, wondering, where did the hands that once gripped here before you go, and did they ever return? The dangers are always there, never changing much. Rough seas, storms, drifting ice, wild beasts, disease, or something as simple as the lack of fresh water. Each era has its own kind of threat, but all of them remind you that the line between exploration and survival is a fragile one. The first danger any explorer knows, and fears, is losing their way. In ancient times before the compass, this often meant death. In the jungle, you could walk in circles for days without realising it. At sea, with nothing to mark your position but the horizon, every direction looks the same, and when clouds cover the sky, even the stars vanish. The only solution then was to remember every detail with utmost care: the shape of a distant mountain, the colour of a coral reef, the scent of wind drifting from land. Those seemingly small signs could be the only thing guiding you back. Then there are the unexpected hazards. A river in the desert that suddenly runs dry, a crevasse opening beneath your feet in the polar regions, or a monsoon storm in an unnamed jungle. In every era, people have found new ways to respond, carrying tools to measure water depth, using ropes to probe the ice ahead, setting up temporary shelters to shield against the wind. The more expeditions that failed, the richer the lessons became, and each lesson etched another line into the storehouse of knowledge for those who came after. You recall the old tales of medieval expeditions, wooden fleets crossing the Atlantic, loaded with salt, dried provisions, and barrels of rainwater, or groups who walked for months across the Eurasian steppe just to find a new route to the east. Reading them now, we see them as reckless. But in the moment, they were simply doing the only thing they knew, moving forward. A strange sound echoes from the bow, pulling you back to the present. The faint clash of metal against metal drifts through the wind, not the familiar sound of an anchor or chain. You quicken your pace, sensing that something is waiting ahead. Something that, once you see it, will tell you this journey is no longer just going a little farther. And that is the moment when every expedition begins to leave its mark. Not at the point of departure, nor necessarily at the destination, but in the instant you realise, from this moment on, nothing will ever be the same. You step closer to the bow, where the metallic sound had come from, and realise it's only the spare anchor hook with a loose rope, tapping lightly against the wooden hull with the rhythm of the waves. But that doesn't make your heartbeat slow, because when you are in the middle of a place no one truly knows, any sound can be the signal of an unfolding event. And if there's one thing every explorer understands, it's this: danger never arrives with a warning. As you gaze into the distance, where the night is slowly fading under the first light of dawn, you find yourself thinking about the threats that have followed humanity since prehistoric times. When our ancestors first stepped beyond the lands they knew to seek a new home, they had no concept of exploration, as we understand it today. Yet they still faced predators, treacherous terrain, and sudden shifts in climate. Back then, the only solution was absolute vigilance and moving in groups, so that one pair of eyes could catch what another might miss. Over thousands of years, as journeys gradually took on clearer purposes, finding trade routes, exploring territories, or seeking resources, danger changed its form. At sea, it became storms and pirates. On land, it was disease and unfriendly native tribes. You picture the explorers of the Age of Discovery, relying only on magnetic compasses and rough hand-drawn maps, daring to sail through waters where waves rose like walls. Many never returned, and when their ships vanished, all that remained were fragments of stories passed down through generations. But it was from those very losses that people learned how to improve. Ships were built sturdier, sails were designed to catch the wind more efficiently, and compasses were kept in sealed boxes to avoid magnetic interference. They even began to carry items that seemed small, yet could save an entire crew: jars of lemon juice to prevent scurvy, spare fishing nets, or barrels of dry salt for preserving meat. You recall the records of a 19th century polar expedition. The greatest danger is not the ice, but the silence. It makes you forget that the ice is moving beneath your feet. In such a place, a single crack in the ice could swallow both a person and their belongings in seconds. The only solution was to probe the path step by step, using a long pole to test the ice before setting foot, and always securing a rope to oneself in case of a fall. Sometimes danger does not come from nature, but from within the expedition itself. History has recorded many failed journeys, not because of storms or wild beasts, but due to disagreements, discouragement, or loss of trust. When you live for months in harsh conditions, the cold, hunger, and exhaustion can turn people against one another. To prevent this, skilled expedition leaders often maintain small routines to keep morale alive, sharing food equally, organising rotating watch shifts, and always keeping everyone focused on a clear goal for the journey's end. On the deck now, you see the fog beginning to thicken. The wind shifts, carrying a heavy dampness. You know this could be the sign of a small storm. Or worse, a whirlpool. In situations like this, experience has shown that it's unwise to push forward without certainty about the wind's direction and the current. Stopping, dropping anchor, and waiting is often safer than recklessly pressing on. It is one of the lessons most seasoned explorers agree upon, that sometimes patience is the most vital survival skill. You head back to the middeck, where the supply barrels are tightly secured, and think of a truth few ever mention. Most of an expedition's time is waiting. Waiting for storms to pass, for the tide to recede, for the snow to stop falling. But it is in those moments of waiting that people learn to prepare more thoroughly, to keep more meticulous records, and to anticipate the worst possible scenarios. A sudden blast of the signal horn echoes from the stern, sharp and decisive. A sailor shouts, his voice torn to shreds by the wind. "Ahead! Unknown object on the water!" A chill runs down your spine instantly. No one knows what it is. A drifting log, a piece of wreckage, or something else entirely. But you understand one thing clearly. This is the moment when every journey, no matter how well prepared, must face the unpredictable. You rush to the port side where a few sailors have gathered, pointing toward the waters ahead. Through the thick fog, a dark shape rises. Unclear whether it is rotting wood, a floating rock, or the corpse of a great sea creature. Gentle waves lap against it, producing a gurgling sound like slow, measured breaths. In that moment you can feel the tense silence blanketing the entire deck. Only the whistling wind and the rope striking the mast break it. Danger at sea often appears like this. Vague, undefined, yet forcing you to make a decision. You know that many expeditions in history have failed not because of great storms, but because of misjudging a situation that seemed small. A drifting log, if hiding a reef beneath, could tear open the ship's hull. A strange creature, if not avoided in time, could throw the entire crew into panic. In ancient times, before binoculars or signal lamps, sailors had to rely on their naked eyes and experience. Some learned to watch the colour of the waves around an object. If the water nearby shifted to an unusual hue, it was likely a hidden reef. Later advancements, such as telescopes, detailed nautical charts, and even sonar, reduced this risk somewhat, but could never eliminate it entirely. At sea, the unexpected always has the upper hand over preparation. You signal the crew to slow the ship, letting it drift gently closer. The distance narrows, and the dark shape comes into clearer view. The broken bow of a ship, carved from hard wood, with a few letters still clinging to its surface, eaten away by shipworms. A fragment of a wreck. And if there is a fragment, that means the rest of it is somewhere nearby. This brings to mind an unspoken rule of exploration. Finding a trace means you've stepped into someone else's story. It could be the story of a fleet lost to a storm, or of a group that vanished after losing their way. But whatever the case, such traces are both a warning and an opportunity. Many explorers in the past found new routes or treasures from remnants left behind. A torn map, abandoned tools, or a path the previous travellers never had the chance to follow. But to turn an opportunity into reality, you need caution. In polar expeditions, when explorers came across camps or equipment left by another team, they would never rush to use them. Instead, they would check thoroughly. Were the items damaged? Was the food still safe? And most importantly, why had the others left them behind? Impulsiveness had cost many groups dearly because they failed to understand the reason the previous travellers had departed. On the deck, you order the fragment of wood to be brought aboard. When it is hauled up, everyone falls silent, staring at the tiny carvings etched into its inner side. Symbols or writing, perhaps. No one can read them immediately, but all understand. This is a message from the past, a clue to a journey that ended somewhere out there. You tell yourself that this is exactly why exploration, after all these centuries, still holds its allure. Not only because it leads us to new lands, but because it connects us to the footsteps once left behind, even if those footsteps have long vanished. Every journey is another layer added to the story of humanity, and every danger is a new chapter yet to be written. The sky begins to brighten, the fog slowly lifting to reveal a vast, still expanse of water. Somewhere out there, the rest of that ship may be waiting to be found. And to an explorer, that is not merely a mission. It is an invitation. You turn to the crew, your voice calm but resolute. We will uncover this story. And so, the helm turns. The bow shifts course. You do not know whether what lies ahead is a reward or a trap. But you know one thing. From ancient times to today, Every advancement in exploration has begun in moments just like this, when people choose to move forward, despite the looming shadow of danger. The bow cuts a slow path through the gentle waves, leaving behind a trail of white foam that quickly dissolves into the grey water. The wind is still steady, the sky shows no sign of storms, and the crew moves in an orderly fashion as if they are all used to sudden changes of course. But you know well that this decision is more than just a turn of the helm. It is a commitment. An expedition that changes its objective midway is like a newly opened path in the forest. You cannot predict how far it will lead. The first thing you do is call for the navigator in charge of the charts. The current nautical chart contains only brief notes on these waters, a few symbols for reefs, a faint remark about an unidentified obstruction, and a wide blank space no one has yet dared to mark. In history, maps have always been both the ally and the betrayer of explorers. In ancient times, a map could lead you to a golden island, or simply into the middle of an empty ocean. In the 15th, 17th centuries, European navigators began using coordinates and meridians, but the margin of error was still large enough that a fleet could spend a month only to realise they were hundreds of nautical miles off course. Today, people have more stable magnetic compasses, better telescopes, and even depth-measuring devices that can warn of underwater terrain in advance. But when you are in a place where even the chart says unsurveyed, experience is still the most reliable guide. An old sailor once told you, when the water changes colour, it's a reef. When foam lingers on the waves, there's a whirlpool. And when seabirds gather, land is near for shore. Such signs have held their value through the centuries. You order the search team to begin sounding. In ancient times, this was done entirely by hand, lowering a long rope with a lead weight, pulling it up to check the depth and the nature of the seabed. If it was soft mud, the anchor could hold safely. If it was hard rock or coral, it had to be avoided. Today on this ship, you also have a basic sonar device, a metal box that hums softly as it sends signals to the bottom and returns echoes. But you still require the use of the traditional sounding line, not because you distrust the machine, but because sometimes a rope pulled up wet with mud can tell you more than cold numbers. While the sounding team works, you watch the surface of the water. An unusual calm in open sea can sometimes signal an undercurrent, something that can drag a ship off course without anyone noticing. In the 18th century, many expeditions lost ships simply because they could not account for the pull of strong ocean currents. Back then, the only solution was to closely observe the drift of floating objects, from bits of wood and leaves to the carcasses of birds, to estimate the speed and direction of the flow. After a while, the sounding results come in. The seabed here slopes gently, about 30 metres deep, with sand mixed with mud. There are no signs of reefs directly beneath the bow. This means the rest of the wreck could be lying somewhere within a few nautical miles. You decide to move the ship in a sweeping arc, scanning with both sonar and sounding lines along the way. On deck, the sailors take turns hauling ropes, measuring, and marking the chart. You watch the new pencil lines filling the blank space on the paper and realise a truth as old as exploration itself. Exploration is not just reaching new places, but turning unknown into known with each patient stroke. Every pencil mark, every depth measurement is a step in pushing the darkness back. Suddenly, the sonar emits an unusual signal, a denser, longer echo. You step to the screen. There is a large object lying on the seabed, its shape not entirely natural. The sounding line team immediately confirms. The rope has struck something solid. Not rock, not coral. The deck stirs with excitement, but you keep your voice calm. Mark the coordinates. We'll lower the small boat to investigate. The small boat is lowered by pulleys, sliding slowly through the air before touching the water with a soft splash, sending ripples outward in widening circles. You and 3 sailors board, bringing with you an anchor line, diving gear, and a logbook. The sky is now fully bright, but the sea still holds its thick grey hue, reflecting the light in a sluggish way, as if hiding something beneath the waves. Before you begin rowing, you look around and realise you are performing a ritual that has existed for thousands of years, leaving the mothership to enter a more dangerous zone. In ancient times, the Phoenicians, Greeks, or Polynesians also lowered small boats from larger decks to find a landing site, probe channels, or approach a new island. Back then, they had no compass, only the skill of reading the wind's direction and the sun's position. A short trip in a small boat could determine the success or failure of the entire expedition. You row slowly, both to conserve strength and to observe the water's surface. Many 19th century explorers recorded in their journals that the best way to locate a shipwreck was to study the sea's surface. If you saw strange ripple patterns or a patch of still water amidst choppy waves, it could mark the position of something below. Here you spot such a patch, several meters wide, where the waves are cut short, leaving only small ripples. As you approach, you signal the crew to drop a temporary anchor to hold position. The current diving gear is simple: a mask, snorkel and a safety line tied to the boat. You descend first. The cold engulfs you the instant the water touches your skin, and the sounds above vanish, leaving only the rhythm of your breathing through the tube and the faint fizz of bubbles drifting around your head. Through the dim light filtering down from the surface, a shape slowly emerges. The hull of a ship, lying on its side, coated in a thick layer of barnacles and seaweed. A few tattered pieces of cloth still cling to a broken mast, swaying gently with the current. You reach out to touch the wood. Solid, but with a rotted core, proof it has been here for many years. In history, reaching a wreck was once a major challenge. In Roman times, people relied on free divers who could hold their breath long enough to retrieve goods from sunken ships. In the 17th century, Europe began using diving suits with metal helmets and air hoses from the boat above. Yet harsh conditions still claimed many who never returned. Every technical advancement was paid for by the sacrifices of those who tried first. You circle the hull, looking for an entry point. There is an opening in the shattered side, like the mouth of a dark cave. You do not risk going far inside, only shining your flashlight in to see a few wooden crates stacked together, some with their lids already burst open, revealing glimpses of metal objects within. But here, the survival rule speaks. Don't open, don't move, don't touch what you don't know. Old tales tell of divers who carried strange objects back and met misfortune, not only because they were heavy or cumbersome, but because they upset balance or caused entanglement during the ascent. You record the position and structure of the hull, then slowly rise. The first breath you take when your head breaks the surface brings a strange sense of relief. The small boat is still anchored in place, the sailors ready to pull you aboard. Back on the boat, you open the logbook and write each detail carefully. Coordinates, depth, hull condition, visible objects. Because you know an expedition only has true value when its story is fully recorded for those who come after. In history, countless journeys have been forgotten simply because the survivors never got the chance to tell them, or no one believed the tale. As the small boat heads back to the mothership, you glance once more at the water behind. Now only fading ripples remain. But you know that below, a part of the story remains untold. And like every explorer before you, you have already stepped one foot into that story, and you will return. The small boat drifts gently alongside the mothership. The pulleys creak as they haul it up, seawater dripping onto the deck, leaving dark, spreading stains on the wood. You step onto the deck, feeling the solid steadiness of the larger vessel beneath your feet. So different from the fragility of the small boat out at sea. No one speaks loudly, but every gaze turns toward you, waiting for your report. You remove your diving mask, wipe the salty water from your forehead, and begin to recount. You describe every detail of the wreck, its tilted position, the layer of barnacles covering it, the broken mast, the wooden crates inside. When you mention the carved symbols on the plank found earlier, a few sailors quietly nod, as if they already understand this is no ordinary wreck. Then you speak of the hidden dangers in approaching a sunken ship. These dangers are nothing new, yet they are always present, no matter the era. Structural collapse, rotten wood, or corroded metal can give way suddenly, trapping the diver inside. History records many cases where divers were caught by a single broken beam, and even with their crew nearby, rescue came too late. Undercurrents. Wrecks often create light swirling currents around them, pulling divers inward, or pushing them off course. In cold waters, this is especially dangerous as low temperatures quickly drain strength. Sheltering creatures, sharks, rays, giant octopuses, all have been recorded in wrecks. Not every creature will attack, but surprise alone can turn a situation dangerous. Sharp objects, rusty nails and broken metal edges can tear diving gear or cause injury. In times before proper protective suits, even a small wound underwater could lead to severe infection. You explain further that in the 19th century, deep-sea expeditions developed basic safety principles for wreck dives. Never dive alone, always keep a guide rope, never retrieve anything heavier than what you can carry in an emergency ascent. And most importantly, assess your exit route before going in. These principles, even with today's advanced equipment, are far from outdated. You look around at the crew and see in their eyes a blend of curiosity and caution. They want to know the rest of the story beneath those waters, but they also understand that each step deeper into it is a step further into unpredictable danger. This is the mindset every explorer knows. The pull of mystery always walks hand in hand with the weight of risk. The sun is now high. Its light glittering on the waves. You order the ship to anchor here, mark the coordinates on the chart, and begin preparing a plan to return to the wreck tomorrow, when the tide will be low and the light will reach the seabed more clearly. Throughout history, wise explorers have known that timing can be as crucial as location. The right moment can cut risk in half and double the chance of success. As the afternoon passes, the ship rests still on the sea, Aesar's, fixed point in a vast emptiness. You stand at the rail, eyes on the calm patch of water where the wreck lies. The feeling is not just one of waiting, but of preparation. The same state countless expeditions through the centuries have felt, poised at the boundary between the known and the unknown. You know that tomorrow, when you dive again, this story will enter a new chapter. But it is just as possible that tomorrow will only bring more questions. And that is the very nature of exploration. Not to find every answer, but to have the courage to live with the questions that have no reply. Last night the sea was strangely calm. There was no sound of large waves striking the hull, only the steady hush, like the slow breathing of a giant creature sleeping beneath your feet. But even in the stillness, you knew that far below, the wreck still lay there, silent as both an invitation and a challenge. This morning the sun rose with the receding tide, and the sea revealed a patch of deeper blue where the wreck rested. You and the crew prepared the equipment, guide ropes, waterproof flashlights, waterproof pouches for your notes, and a few sealed containers in case samples needed to be collected. Before entering the water, you spent a few minutes writing a detailed plan in your log. Objectives, the intended route, maximum time underwater, and emergency signals. This is a habit every professional expedition has kept for centuries. In the days of James Cook's voyages, notes were not only for storing scientific information, but also for the possibility that the person carrying them would not return. The pages would speak for the one who had vanished. You and two sailors dive in. The cool water envelops you. The sounds above vanish, leaving only the rhythm of your breathing through the snorkel. The wreck slowly emerges, clearer than yesterday, a long dark shape shrouded in seaweed. The broken mast lies across, forming a natural gate into a large opening along the ship's side. You go in first, hand gripping the guide rope, connected to the diver behind you. The space inside is narrow and dark. Your flashlight sweeps across corners, revealing wooden crates packed close together, some with lids already broken. On the floor, fine sand covers scattered objects. A dull, tarnished metal bar, fragments of pottery, and what appears to be a coil of rope nearly rotted away. History records many cases where explorers found valuable items only to have them ruined by improper preservation. In the 18th century, when East India merchant ships met disaster, salvage teams often stored wood or iron in sealed barrels of seawater until they reached shore to prevent cracking or breaking from sudden changes in humidity. Today, the methods are more scientific, but the principle remains the same. Keep the object as close to its original state as possible until proper treatment can be applied. You touch little, using only a waterproof camera to record the position and shape of each item. To you, images and notes matter more than hastily retrieved artifacts. A wise explorer always knows that the greatest value of a discovery lies not in possessing it, but in the story it can tell when combined with full context and data. Once the main hold has been surveyed, you signal to withdraw. The water inside is starting to cloud as stirred up sand drifts upward, a clear sign that it's time to leave. Outside, you take one last look at the hull, feeling as if you have just read the first page of a thick book, with the rest still locked beneath layers of water and time. Back in the small boat, you open your logbook, your handwriting steady and slow. In the 19th century, explorers often spent hours each day writing expedition journals. Not because they had spare time, but because they knew human memory fades, while the page does not. On a journey, the page is a second map, the map of memory. The mothership gradually comes into view ahead. You know that today was only the beginning. To truly understand the story of that wreck, there will need to be more dives, more notes, and perhaps deeper ventures into these waters. But that is precisely why you are here. To turn the unknown into the known, step by step. Without haste, without noise, but with certainty. Back on deck, you place the plank on the wooden table, wiping away the salt and seaweed still clinging to it. In the afternoon light, the faint carvings begin to appear more clearly. Not decorative patterns, but ordered symbols. Some are geometric shapes, triangles, circles, zigzags. Others resemble characters, yet belong to no alphabet you have ever seen. You take paper and graphite, gently rubbing to transfer the entire surface of the plank. This is a technique archaeologists and explorers have used for centuries to copy carvings without damaging the original. In the 19th century, Egyptian survey expeditions used this very method to study hieroglyphs on stone, bringing replicas back for research in safer locations. An old sailor nearby squints at it. Looks like old navigational symbols. Back in the day, many expeditions didn't dare put their real coordinates on paper for fear they'd fall into the wrong hands, so they coded them with shapes. That makes you recall stories from maritime history. In the Age of Discovery, some crews created secret maps by changing island names, altering coastline shapes, or using symbols like stars, waves, and arrows to mark wind directions and fresh water supply points. Only members of the crew, or those the knowledge was passed to, could read them. You begin comparing the symbols on the plank with old handwritten notes from the ship's library. A few shapes match symbols for wind direction. Others resemble marks for seasonal currents. But 3 consecutive symbols are entirely unfamiliar. A circle with a dot in the centre, a 3-peaked zigzag, and a spearhead pointing downward. In the journals of 17th century explorers, a circle with a dot often marked a target point, or important island. A zigzag could signify a strait or a reef-filled area, and a downward-pointing spearhead. Sometimes it was the warning sign for dangerous deep waters. If this interpretation is correct, the sequence could be an instruction. From the target island, pass through the reef area, to the dangerous deep waters. Why would someone carve such directions into a plank from a ship? History records expeditions that carried wooden boards engraved with coded routes, so that if the ship was lost, the board could drift into other hands and guide them to continue the journey. In the Caribbean, in the 18th century, there were even cases of pirates leaving behind carved boards marking treasure locations. But only those who could decipher them would find their prize. You realise that this plank might be part of a larger story, an unfinished voyage, or an abandoned mission. If the wreck below holds similar markings, you may be able to piece together the complete original map. As the sun sinks lower, its light turning gold and red, you mark the page in your notes and place the plank in a wooden chest, locking it. At sea, preserving information can be more important than preserving food. Centuries ago, many expeditions lost all leads simply because their symbols or maps were blurred by water and their journeys vanished into obscurity. You stand at the rail, looking toward the direction indicated by the circle with a dot symbol. That stretch of water looks unremarkable now, but in the last light of day you feel as though it is waiting, as if it knows you have stepped into its story and that you will not stop halfway. The next morning the sea is flat as a giant sheet of glass. The air is damp and heavy, the wind just strong enough to fill the sails lightly, letting the ship drift along the course you marked the night before. The navigator lays a ruler on the modern chart, drawing a thin line in the direction suggested by the circle with a dot symbol. But the space ahead is still an area poorly surveyed, marked only by a few vague notes from journeys long past. You know today's voyage is nothing like following GPS coordinates or satellite instructions. It is more like how ancient explorers once travelled, relying on natural signs and shared symbols. In the time of the Polynesians, sailors learned to read the waves, their height, the wind's direction, and even the vibration of the hull on the water, to tell whether they were near or far from land. In medieval Europe, navigators used star charts, memorising the positions of familiar constellations and their seasonal shifts. But relying on ancient symbols carries many risks. A symbol could have been misinterpreted by the very first generation to pass it down, or its meaning could have shifted over time. For example, a circle with a dot once meant island with fresh water in the 16th century, but by the 18th century, in the hands of pirates, it could mean buried treasure site. If you choose the wrong meaning, the ship could wander into a place far from your true destination. You signal the crew to keep a moderate speed, giving time to observe. A few seabirds appear, circling above before disappearing toward the starboard side. Historically, expeditions often used the presence of seabirds as a sign of nearby land, especially if they flew steadily in one direction during the afternoon. Noting the direction, you wonder if it connects to the point the symbol is guiding you toward. As the sun climbs higher, its light cuts through the water, revealing distinct colour changes. A band of pale blue stretches like a ribbon, interwoven with darker patches. The old sailor beside you nods. Reef or coral shoals, they sit just below the surface, changing the water's colour like that. You immediately order a change of course, steering left to go around. History holds many accounts of exploration ships stranded because they failed to notice the shift in the water's hue. In the 18th century, a Pacific survey expedition lost nearly a year repairing their ship after the bow was torn open by a reef, all because a young navigator failed to notice the colour just before sunset. Once past the discoloured water, you look ahead and notice an unusual horizon, a faint shadow of land, but not a broad coastline. Perhaps an island or a cluster of large rocks rising from the sea. On the current chart, this area is marked only with no detailed data. Your heart beats a little faster, but your mind keeps an even pace. The old explorers always said, when you see land from afar, don't. Trust your eyes. Trust time. Meaning don't rush straight toward it. Approach in stages, confirming the wind, the current, and the safe entry points. You have the new coordinates recorded, marking a small triangle on the chart, something that may later become your symbol on this voyage's map. And as the ship continues to close the distance, you know you are reenacting part of the work of those who came before, slowly turning the blank spaces on the map into lines, notes and stories that only those who have set foot there will understand. By late afternoon, the shadow on the horizon has sharpened, its edges hard and rocky. Though you have yet to reach it, you can already feel that this land will be the next step in the story. and perhaps the key to deciphering the entire set of symbols on the wooden plank. The ship drifts slowly toward the landmass now clearly visible on the horizon. When only a few nautical miles remain, its true shape begins to emerge. A large rock rising steeply from the sea on the outer side, but sloping inward to a narrow strip of sand. Beyond that, the faint shadow of low trees covers part of the island, swaying lightly in the wind. On modern charts, this place is completely blank. No name, no notes, no indication of prior survey. But that does not mean no one has ever set foot here. In the history of exploration, many unrecorded islands turned out to have once been stopovers for sailors, merchants or fishermen, yet were not prominent enough to be added to official nautical maps. You order the sails lowered and the speed reduced as the ship approaches the beach. When gentle waves lap against the hull, you look closely and notice several unusual straight lines on the sand, evenly spaced parallel grooves running from the water's edge upward. They are not made by wind or waves. This is the kind of sign many explorers since the 15th century have learned to recognise. The drag marks of something heavy pulled ashore from a small boat. A young sailor follows your gaze and asks, "Could they be old marks?" You nod. Possibly, but whether old or new, they tell us one thing: people have been here. History is full of cases where expeditions found traces of human presence in places thought deserted. It could be a piece of charred wood buried in the sand, footprints pressed into damp soil, or stones arranged in a straight line. In the 18th century, some sailors even left personal markers, a triangular pile of rocks, or a branch stuck upside down in the ground, to signal to others in their crew that they had been there. You lower a small boat and, with a team of 6, row to shore. Stepping onto the sand, the first sensation is silence. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves, only the soft wash of waves. Kneeling, you brush away a thin layer of sand and find beneath it glossy black fragments of charcoal. Certain evidence of a fire once burned here, perhaps for cooking or warmth. You note in your log, evidence of a fire, date undetermined, drag marks from shoreline inland, possible temporary stopover. In history, such notes were often the first step in turning an unnamed island into a fixed point on the maritime map. Just a few lines of description, a set of coordinates and a date. And from then on, every ship after would know this place existed. Moving a little further inland, you and your team come upon 2 parallel rows of stones, covered in moss and sand. The space between them is wide enough to fit a small boat. This is the kind of boat cradle that many coastal cultures have used for centuries, protecting vessels from damage as the tides rose and fell. This changes your initial theory entirely. The island was not merely a temporary stop, but may have been a regular station on an hanhao, old sea route. If so, the circle with a dot symbol on the plank might refer to this very place. Standing on the beach, you look out toward the sea. The mothership lies anchored offshore, and you understand that today's discovery is only the surface. Beneath the soil, and within those trees, could lie more traces. Tools, structures, perhaps even carved stones or maps. But the experience of every explorer says the same. Don't rush. Before venturing deeper, survey the surroundings, record every detail, and prepare an exit plan in case of trouble. For even an unnamed island may hold stories no one expects. You and the crew leave the beach, stepping onto higher ground. Here the sand gradually gives way to damp clay, where footprints sink deep and hold their shape, as if no one has stepped here for months. Sunlight filters through the low canopy, falling in faint golden streaks across the ground. The air is cooler, carrying the earthy scent of decaying leaves mingled with the faint salt of the sea. After some distance, you come across large stones arranged in a curved wall, chest high. The open space inside is enough for 5 to 6 people to sit, and the ground in the centre has been dug into a shallow hollow. This is not a natural formation. In history, many hidden way stations along old sea routes were built in this way. A stone windbreak where a small group could spend the night, cook, or repair a boat without being spotted from afar. A young sailor bends down and picks up a small shard lying among the dry leaves. The blue glaze has faded, but the shape of the fragment suggests it was once part of a bowl or storage jar. You brush your fingers lightly over it. It has the cool, smooth feel of well-fired ceramic. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, many merchant and exploration crews carried durable glazed pottery to store water or dried food, as it withstood temperature changes and absorbed little odour. You record detailed notes, the location, the shape of the stone circle, and the artefact found. This is the method explorers have always followed, never rushing to conclusions, only preserving information to later piece together a complete picture. In many historical accounts, seemingly small details like a ceramic fragment or a smoothed stone have led to major discoveries about old trade routes or once thriving cultures. Roughly 100 metres further inland, the group encounters a narrow stone passage leading into an inner space. The rock walls on either side are polished smooth at lower height, as if worn down by rope or human hands over time. You realise this could have been a transport route, a place where heavy goods were hauled from the shore into hiding. During the age of pirates and secret traders, such natural rock channels were often used as temporary storage for cargo, since from a distance they looked like nothing more than natural cracks. Inside the passage lies an open earthen courtyard, carpeted with green moss and dotted with a few small tree stumps. At the edge stands a rectangular stone platform, about 1 metre high, its top surface flat and marked with several evenly spaced round depressions. This could once have been a workbench or a place to set storage vessels. Some ancient coastal cultures use such platforms to hold fresh water jars, keeping them free from salt contamination and sand. You feel as though you are standing at the heart of an organised stopover, not just a random shelter. Historically, stations like this were often positioned along long sea routes, serving fleets that had to cross empty Hormukam, stretches of ocean for days. They were rarely marked openly, and their locations were usually passed down orally or encoded in symbols like the plank you found. Wind from the sea slips through the stone passage, carrying a faint sound like creaking wood. You look around and see no wooden structure, yet you have the sense that something else is hidden here. Perhaps a path leading down to a lower area, or a structure buried beneath earth and time. You turn to the crew. Mark the entire area. We'll return with light excavation tools and measuring equipment. For you understand that in exploration, the allure of a discovery does not lie in the moment of finding it, but in the process of peeling away each layer of the story. Layers of soil, of stone, of time, until everything once forgotten is brought back into the light. As the edge of the small spade slices through the moss on the stone platform, you hear a faint clink. Beneath the damp soil lies a thin sheet of metal, tarnished yet still bearing deeply engraved patterns. You gently wipe away the mud, and an image emerges. A 3-masted ship with triangular sails, and beneath it a row of ornate symbols. Not letters from any recent era. The old sailor murmurs, "This is not from our century." And in that instant the story leaps. In your mind's eye, the faint image on the metal plate unfolds into another scene. A 15th century fleet, sails yellowed with age, crossing a stretch of sea unmarked on any map, using this very island as a secret anchorage. Europe was just entering the age of discovery, and ships like these carried the hope of finding new routes to the east, or untapped sources of gold and silver. The lead navigator of such a voyage, by tradition, would have an image of his ship and the symbols of his route engraved on metal or wood, then hidden at a stopover point. The purpose was for later crews, if they passed by, to recognise that they were standing on the path of those who came before. At the same time, such engravings served as a cipher. Only those who knew how to decode it could read the next leg of the journey. In that era, stopovers like the island you stand on were never recorded on official nautical charts. They lay outside public trade routes, existing as hidden links in a network shared among explorers and merchants. An island could store barrels of fresh water, dried provisions, even spare weapons, all concealed to keep them from the eyes of pirates. You return to the present, realizing the metal plate on the stone platform fits neatly with the edge of the wooden plank you found on the wreck beneath the sea. When joined, the symbols form a more complete sequence, clearly pointing toward another location farther to the southeast. This fragmentary map has survived centuries. From the age of discovery, through countless failed and successful voyages, to lie in wait until today. In the history of exploration, moments like this always carry the same feeling: continuity. You are not merely discovering an island or a wreck, but walking a road once opened by others, buried by time, now awakened for you to follow. As the sun dips lower, you place the metal plate in a sealed container and lock it. The ship will leave the island tomorrow morning, heading toward the direction indicated by the new symbol. And you know that somewhere ahead, another chapter of exploration's history is waiting. Not in this era, but in another slice of time. Harsher, more distant, yet full of promise. The cold wind slices across your cheeks, leaving stinging lines like cuts from a blade. You pull your wool scarf tighter over your face, each breath escaping as thick white clouds that dissolve instantly into the air, heavy with the scent of ice. Around you, the world exists in only two colours, white and grey. There is no golden sand or blue water, as in the distant sea voyage of the past. Now, you are on the edge of a frozen continent, where the map shows only a blank white expanse with the words unsurveyed. It is the 19th century, an era when the great powers of Europe raced to find a passage through the polar regions to shorten trade routes. Expeditions like yours carried the hope of finding a corridor through the ice, but in exchange faced the risk of losing both ship and crew to an endless winter. You stand on the deck of a steel-reinforced wooden ship, gazing ahead. Towering icebergs as high as buildings drift silently with the currents. The chief sailor comes beside you, pointing at the compass. The needle's off. Magnetic ice around here is throwing it off. You nod, for this is a familiar danger in the polar regions. In this century, many expeditions have learned to navigate without a working compass, by watching the sun when the sky is clear, tracking the shapes of drifting ice, and most importantly, keeping detailed records of each leg of the journey to avoid retracing the same route. Below deck, your map is spread wide across the table. Beside it sits a small wooden box, something you carried from your previous voyage, containing the metal plate and wooden plank that fit together into a guiding symbol. They do not belong to this icy region, yet you brought them as part of a thread of memory from explorers before you. Sometimes the feeling of continuing a journey begun by others matters more than the destination itself. The ship pushes into a narrow channel between two massive ice formations. The sound of the wooden hull creaking under the pressure of ice silences everyone. In history, this is when disaster often struck. A single iceberg moving faster than expected could crush a ship completely. Some expeditions developed ice fenders, thick wooden panels lashed along the hull to reduce direct pressure, a technique both simple and effective. As the low sun touches the horizon, its light spilling red across the ice, you anchor near a large floe for the night. Finding a harbour in the sea of ice is an art, choosing one big enough not to break apart, yet not so tall that it might collapse onto the ship. These principles in any century rest on the same foundation: patient observation and knowledge earned through countless voyages. You step back onto the deck, the cold wind slipping down your collar. In the distance, a thin dark line cuts across the white, perhaps a crack in the ice, or the shadow of something rising above it. You know, just like the unnamed island in your previous journey, this frozen land keeps its own story, and tomorrow you will step into it. The next morning the wind is still as cold as if the night had never ended. Pale light spreads evenly across the ice, casting no distinct shadows, making everything seem frozen in place. You and 4 sailors leave the ship, carrying climbing ropes, marker stakes, lanterns, and some dry rations. Each person wraps cloth around their face, leaving only the eyes exposed, and steps firmly onto the packed snow. The dark streak you saw yesterday is now clearer, A long crack, its edges frozen over, winding like a massive scar. You kneel and tap the surface lightly with the blade. The sound is deep and solid, meaning there's a hollow beneath. In the history of polar exploration, such cracks often formed where older ice sheets collided and split, leaving gaps that wind and temperature changed over time. But sometimes they revealed something swallowed by the ice. You signal the group to widen a section of the crack. The brittle ice snaps and splinters, breaking away in small shards. Beneath, a deep, dark void appears, and within it, a curve of wood. You recognise instantly the familiar shape of a ship's hull. The group falls silent for a few seconds. A ship trapped and buried in ice. A story that has played out many times in history. In the 19th century, dozens of expeditions vanished this way, leaving behind nothing but rumours and a few pieces of driftwood found years later. Some were not discovered until a century after, when the ice thawed or someone accidentally dug into them. You and another sailor climb down into the crevasse, stepping onto the tilted deck. The wood is still solid but weathered, coated with a thin layer of ice. Beside you, a cabin door hangs ajar, the interior in total darkness. You shine your light inside, revealing a few small wooden crates, a rolled tent, and a rusted iron chest. Instead of opening it immediately, you record its position and mark it with a stake and red rope. This principle has saved many survey teams. Never move an object without proper preparation, because sometimes it's holding the entire structure in balance. In the 19th century, one British expedition lost nearly all of its excavation work when they pulled up a heavy chest, causing the surrounding ice to collapse and bury everything under several meters of new ice. Looking closer, you notice a piece of fabric protruding from the ice near the cabin door. Pulling it gently free, you find it is a small flag, frayed at the edges but still bearing traces of blue and white. In one corner, embroidered in silver thread, is the symbol of a circle with a dot in the centre, identical to the one carved into the wooden plank and the metal plate you carry. In that moment, it feels as though you've stepped through a doorway in time, from the warm seas of the 15th century to the frozen continent of the 19th. The symbol still appears, a slender thread connecting voyages separated by hundreds of years. You carefully roll up the flag and store it in a sealed container. Then you lift your gaze to the endless ice around you. This may be only a small fragment of the story, but you know you've found proof that expeditions across different eras were not separate at all. They were part of a greater journey, one that crossed the edges of maps in search of something only they could understand. On the way back to the ship, a strong wind rises, lashing your face and forcing you to bow your head against it. But inside, you feel more certain than ever. Tomorrow the question will no longer be, should we go on? But how far are we ready to go? The polar blizzard raged for 3 days, but when the skies finally cleared, the decision was made. Leave the ice and head south, carrying the small flag and the ancient symbol. You knew you had reached the limit of this place, and to unravel the story, you would have to go much farther, far beyond Earth. Years later, you stand at the observation window of an orbital station, gazing down at the blue planet. Sunlight glints off oceans and glaciers, the regions you once set foot on, now nothing more than tiny specks. Beside you, on the desk, is the same box containing the metal plate, the wooden plank, and the weathered flag. The age of exploration has changed. From wooden sails to steel ships, then to lightweight alloy hulls and ion drives. But its essence remains the same: to look into an unmarked void and decide to step in. Your current mission is to explore a newly discovered asteroid orbiting the Sun beyond Mars. Images taken by a probe show unusual surface formations, vast circles carved deep into the rock, some with a dot in the centre. When the image appears on the display, your heart races. That symbol, after hundreds of years, has appeared again. This time not on sea or ice, but on a world with no water or atmosphere. Aboard the lander, you open your digital log, scrolling through every past record, from notes on the unnamed island of the 15th century to the coordinates of the polar expanse in the 19th. All of them lead to this symbol, as if it has crossed every boundary of time and space to wait for you here. When you land, stone dust clouds the camera before settling to reveal a flat plateau. In its centre lies a circle nearly 100 metres in diameter, carved deep into the basalt, with a round pit in the middle as if drilled by some colossal tool. You step closer, feeling as though you are walking into the heart of all your previous journeys. From the island, the shipwreck, the polar ice, all converging here. You place your hand on the cold stone rim, and for the first time, it feels not just like continuing the history of exploration, but touching something beyond human history. The circle with a dot, it turns out, is not merely a marker left by explorers. It could be an invitation, or a challenge, from an intelligence that walked before us long ago. You stand in silence, in the midst of an endless void, and understand that every journey, whether by sea, through ice or in space, begins and ends in the same place, with a question unanswered, and that is the end of a journey of explorers. Surely by now you've had a good night's sleep, haven't you? If you enjoyed the story, come back tomorrow and tell us how you drifted into dreams. Thank you for listening.